Welcome back to the second hour of the show with no name for the last day of summer, September 2021, 2012. I'm Bob Going with Gavin Murdoch, our special guest, noted presidential historian David Pietrusza, city historian Robert Van Hasseln, and of course we have Jim DeKosha off in the wilderness there. Feel free to jump.
Call that, isn't there? A Man in the Wilderness?
I don't know.
Yes, there was.
Who was in it?
Richard Harris.
Oh, Richard Harris. He was the Man Called Horse, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. The Tonka Sheepy.
All right. I remember when they did the sequel to Man Called Horse?
Return of a Man Called Horse.
Return of a Man Called Horse. Yeah, they did. And Gene Shalit gave his best review. Should they have made the Return of a Man Called Horse? Nay. Anyway, all right, we're back. We've been discussing lots of stuff. And of course, David is the author of 1948, Harry Truman's Improbable Victory in the Year That Transformed America. David, what do you see parallels this year?
Well, in the first hour, you touched on a couple of them. We had the president who started out really high in both years in terms of popularity and sunk downward to where they were seriously endangered. The do-nothing Congress, the bland northeastern governor. So you've got those as the parallels, and then you have really significant differences. One, Barack Obama is not Harry Truman. He's not Harry Truman in that he hasn't been through tough races before like Truman had. Truman actually lost his county legislator job in 1924, got it back. He barely got nominated in 34. He was left for dead in 40. And 40 and 34 were three-way races, splits in the Democratic Party. So he'd been through that before and knew how to just sort of get through it. And that may have given them the strength to get through it in 48. Obama has had a lot of cakewalks. I think the 4 or 5 people that were going to challenge him or were in the race for his first state Senate seat all get ruled off the ballot. I mean, he loses the one time to was it not Bobby Seale, but the other fellow in the Black Panther congressman in Chicago. But he has a lot of Ryans in his career.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah. So his original Republican opponent, Ryan, gets off the ballot in disgrace, and they have to bring in Alan Keyes, who is, not happening, not from Illinois. And John McCain, shall we say, mistakes were made, and mistakes were made under George W. Bush. So fairly easy run that time as well. And Truman also is great extemporaneously, and he realizes this in part because he realizes he stinks reading from a piece of paper.
They're almost exact opposites.
They are, and they're not the common, it's like they both appeal to the common man. Truman is the common man. He's a dirt farmer. He's a failed small businessman. He's a small town mason. He's never been to college. He's the last president never to be to college. And no president, even then, this is kind of weird, because the last guy before him was Andrew Johnson, who could barely read. Okay? So he is the common man.
Frontier bartender or something, wasn't he? Something like that.
Something like
that. But not only
Taylor.
Was he the common man, he was a common man that people could have put a sincere trust in. Mm-hmm. They could believe what he had to say. You disagree with him or not,
right,
but you can believe what he has to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a distinct difference between what we've got running today. As a person who portrays himself as part of the common man, I do not believe he exhibits the trust that Truman did.
No, and his background is his father attended Harvard. His stepfather had a job with a big oil company or with the government in Indonesia. His mother was with the Ford Foundation. His grandmother was the vice president of a bank. He's been to Harvard and Columbia, and his wife to Princeton. This is not the common man. Okay? State University of New York at Albany. That's the common man.
That's the common man.
And, so very, very different guys. The
Are you
economy.
announcing anything?
Am I announcing anything?
Yeah.
Well, it would be premature at this time. We'll see how it goes with Romney.
You have no immediate plans. Right?
We'll see how it goes with Romney. But you also have the economy vastly different. 3.8% unemployment in 1948.
Which, considering it had just come off
of everything. And fake full employment in World War II. You take 10 million young guys out of the workforce, and wow, we've got people working overtime. Well, isn't that wonderful? It's things. The people were singing. The people weren't singing "I'm Just Wild About Harry" in '48. They really were singing "Happy Days Are Here Again" because they had finally come. The killing had stopped.
Yeah.
People really were employed. The problem they had was inflation. They had 7% inflation in 1948. They weren't used to this,
right?
Because Coolidge, Harding, no inflation in the 20s, no inflation in the Depression, price controls during World War II. So it's like, whoa, where'd this come from? We haven't had this since like 1919, 1920, and we don't like it. The Democrats are very effective in running against this. The Republicans ignore everything. And so at the Democrat convention in 48, a woman who's Democrat committee woman, I think from somewhere, or co-chair, a woman named...
Probably the second ward.
Yeah, India Edwards gets up there and is waving around a piece of steak from the podium. That's what I call a red meat speech. And she said, these Republicans haven't done anything about these high food prices. I sat across from fairly significant figures in the last year or so and said, if the Republicans want to capitalize on something, talk about inflation, I don't care what your phony numbers say, okay? You know why the numbers are bad? Because your house is worth less, okay? You're getting less, so housing is cheaper. Well, when, hello, what's the gas down the street? $4.07 as we speak.
Right.
And the food prices, the average people know this, but the people I talk to about it, and where I talk to them about it, it's like, it's just a blank.
Right.
And I am not seeing, I heard yesterday, Rush and Glenn both talking about it.
Well,
they're wealthy and they get it.
I think it was significant that it was mentioned at the Republican convention several times. Several speakers were pointing out the gas and the food prices. So something's sinking in.
Something's sinking in, but
yeah.
when's...
But the bankers look at these; their statistics don't show
no,
inflation.
There's no inflation,
but
and I've been told
but
that.
the inflation at our level is pretty damn obvious.
I see it all the time, and it just scares
You just walk
me.
in the supermarket, try to buy fish, and what you think is it used to be the cheapest thing you could get. Hamburger, the cheapest stuff with the pink slime is like $4 a pound now, which is crazy.
Give me a break.
Crazy.
No, I mean, if they would hammer on this instead of these abstractions, or just talking about small business, whatever, it's like just talk about something that hits everyone.
But do you think because
including the 47%, particularly the 47%?
but they're being subsidized? But don't you think because they're talking so much?
Well, they do have food stamps, but their food stamps are buying less.
Because they talk so much all the time about everything, there becomes a point that they run out of stuff to talk about, and they get to this minutia that doesn't mean anything. So they got to keep talking. Before, everything wasn't covered 24/7. It is today.
Yes.
And these guys are out there, and it's every day that they got to be thinking of something new to talk about, because everybody heard across the country what I spoke yesterday, as opposed to this time you could speak in New York, you speak in Boston.
Yeah.
It's the people in Boston haven't heard what you said before.
Oh yeah, everyone's heard.
Here
heard
it's
you before
just,
you
it's
take the
getting
stage.
recycled. And then they start making mistakes because they're trying to make up this stuff as they go along. And I think people really lose their trust when all of a sudden dawns on them, wait a minute, this isn't.
A lot of stuff
my
is done with
reality.
advertising these days. It wasn't. Obviously there was no television back then, or I'm sure they had radio ads and such.
Well-
But like now, you go to
And in the swing
call up a
states.
YouTube movie and you get 20 Barack Obama commercials in a row before you get your before you get the show with no name.
Well, your print advertising. How many times?
Actually, I get Romney ads.
I mean,
for my show.
I keep seeing these banner ads for this woman named Clark, Judge Clark.
Christine Clark,
right?
all the time.
All the time. I don't know if that's effective or not, but maybe
It's
is.
every day. I know who she is now.
I know who she is.
Yeah. I wouldn't have thought a moment about her if I didn't see these ads every day.
Right.
Yeah. So who knows? Well, how aggressive was Tom? We keep forgetting. You kind of forget Tom Dewey in your book. Actually, the book's about the '48 election.
He's the
and
least
Dewey,
interesting of the four guys. He could have, if he hadn't, when it's that close, you change anything, and it's
Right.
crucial.
So
everything is crucial.
So what were the mistakes he made that caused him to lose?
Well, he's bland. He doesn't say anything. He picks the wrong running mate. He campaigns in the wrong areas.
By the way, Earl Warren's wife.
Nina Warren actually votes for Harry Truman. So
And lets us know about it.
yeah, at some point it comes out. Earl Warren couldn't stand Dewey personally. Couldn't stand him, and couldn't stand him the first time he met him. I think he had been asked to be vice president in 1944, and he turned Dewey down. And then in 1948, it's like, if I ever want anything from this party again on a national level, I better stop saying no. Maybe he was thinking Supreme Court. I don't know. But he was like saying, well, I'll go through with it. But his heart wasn't in it. There was profound disagreements on what he should say on the stump. There was like a shouting match when he was in Buffalo on the phone back to the Dewey headquarters. He doesn't deliver the Scandinavian. They thought he would deliver the Scandinavian vote in Minnesota and North Dakota because his whole his wife and him and all Scandinavian. They thought that would count for something. He doesn't deliver California. He doesn't deliver even his own wife's vote. So, it's just awful. And, of course, the overconfidence of Dewey, they shut down their San Francisco office in mid-October. It's that bad. Now, in terms of money, you also
because they figure it's a sure thing.
It's a sure thing. You got Earl Warren, Mr. Vote Getter on the ticket. Come on. We're going to carry this. And in terms of money, the whole party is kind of overconfident. Remember, from the days of Evan Charlie, Hugh Scott, who replaced Everett Dirksen as Senate permanent minority leader. He was from Pennsylvania, real moderate guy. He was the Republican national chair that year. And he's out in October saying, come on, give us some more money. Come on. But, when you got it won, I don't have to send in a check. At the end of the day, the Democrats take in $2.7 million for their campaign. Think about that. $2.7 million for the whole campaign? That's pretty bad. The Republicans take in 2.1. Now,
The party of the rich.
the party of the rich and famous, yeah. Now, part of Truman's problem is $700,000 of that comes in after the election.
Wow.
There's nothing like friends in politics,
Oh,
is there?
yeah.
So yeah. But and of course Truman also, I suspect that he's got $1 million worth of free off the books union labor,
Right.
just out there for him.
Right.
So it's not as easy as it looks for Dewey.
And how aggressive was his personal campaigning?
Harry Truman delivers 270 speeches that year. Not that year. After Labor Day during the campaign, because
Wow.
he has two whistle stop tours. He has one in the spring where he's sort of the first half of that he's like doing his Joe Biden impression. He's coming out with really weird stuff. Then he kind of like, okay, all right, calm down, just refine the message, and he's got it down because he's taken his show out on the road in the spring, so he really knows what he's doing in the fall.
It's kind of like the Marx Brothers doing.
Yeah. Now Dewey does not really take his act out on the road in the spring. One, he doesn't have. There are a limited number of primaries, but he doesn't go out because he's made a pledge and he keeps it. that I'm not going to leave New York until like we get the budget, until we get the legislative session done. Okay, so he doesn't go out to Wisconsin where he gets killed. He doesn't go out to Nebraska where he gets killed and Stassen wins. Finally, and the Assembly Republicans are like giving him some trouble on something. Finally, they get the session done, and he goes out to Oregon where he campaigns furiously against Stassen. But Truman gives 270 speeches in the fall. Dewey is 18 years younger than Truman. He gives 101 less. 101 less. So he's not Mr. Energetic. The Victory Express, his train. No.
Well, you know, they say to this day that no Republican ever wins without Ohio. And you mentioned, I think, on the first hour that Dewey made exactly one appearance in Ohio.
One stop. He makes like 13 or 14 in Oklahoma. His wife was from Oklahoma.
Oh, so they got to visit the family.
Whatever. I don't know.
So the train didn't get him to the station then, huh? District B train. He just kind of got left on the side rail. Didn't get him where he wanted to go.
It took him around, but he didn't make all the stops that he should have. His big rally at the end of the campaign at Madison Square Garden. They've got this big motorcade coming from, I don't know, Grand Central or somewhere, over from the east side. It's got to go up to Madison Square Garden, which was then at 50th and 8th. And you've got everyone involved, and it's like, he's not in the motorcade.
What?
He's not in the motorcade. He can't even be bothered to show up in the motorcade.
Wow.
You know, life is 80% showing up.
Who said that?
Woody Allen said that. Or success is, yeah.
Paul Tonko must have said that too.
He's right. He's right. That it counts for a lot.
You know, I think it was, must have been I'm not sure whether it's 1980 must have been.
People know you want it.
Richard Nixon had been out of office for a while,
Yeah.
in 1980, and of course was a disgraced former president, but he still had a fine political mind to the day he died. You know, he understood strategy and wedge issues and how to run a campaign and stuff like it. It was just in his gene makeup, I think. And he advised Reagan privately in the campaign to choose one state that you have to win and work that state like you're running for governor. And that's what Reagan did, and it was Ohio. And he goes through Ohio on the Whistle Stop tour, and he spends like 4 days in a row there, and it just dominates the state, and of course wins Ohio in the election. But Dewey does just the opposite. Ohio's a state he really needs.
Well, he thinks he's got it because he did so well in the Midwest in 44.
Meanwhile, he's annoyed the party.
He's annoyed the party too, yeah.
Who are the people you rely on? You need your May deals, and what was your grandmother's name?
Kathleen?
Your Kathleen Murdochs to get out there and hold their women's teas and get out to vote, right?
I think Dewey was just tired after all the years he'd spent as governor. And
All the years?
Yeah.
He was a young man. He's
He's in his 40s then, wasn't he?
yeah, that's the amazing thing. He's washed up at about 47 or 48. He had been governor for 6 years. He had been DA for 4. He runs for governor against Lehman in 38. He leaves the district attorneyship and loses very narrowly. And people go, whoa. But he loses. So in 1940, he runs for president, holding no office and only been a district attorney. Okay?
And he's a serious candidate.
He leads. He leads on 3 ballots at the Republican National Convention that year, as he says afterwards in a rare fit of humor. But they were the wrong 3, you know. And Wilkie wins it on the 4th. So, you know, the math of that is he's almost nominated for president at the age of 40.
With nothing.
With nothing.
Of course, when Wilkie had nothing.
No
either.
background. Well, I mean, compared to Wilkie, yeah, he's like, you know, Calvin Coolidge in terms of holding political office. And then in 42, he wins a huge, huge victory in New York State. He carries Harlem in 42. Doesn't carry it in 46, which is kind of interesting. I'm not sure why. I think there was an issue about integrating the State National Guard, which was an issue. But he had passed the first anti-discrimination measure in the country, the Quinn Ives Act.
Well, let's ask the military historian of the state of New York here.
What's up with that?
What's up with that? When did the National Guard integrate?
It begins to integrate in 48 as a
Aha!
as a federal component under the direction of
Truman.
Truman.
Okay.
Yeah. But before that, New York had a rather poor record when it came to blacks in the military.
There you go.
Well, were there black National Guard units?
Yes, we get them later in New York than in other states because there were many blacks served in New York militia during the Revolution and during the War of 1812. But after emancipation in New York, which is not even finished until 1827, the state militia, it's clearly a matter of law. No blacks are allowed in the state militia. And that doesn't change until...
As a matter of law?
Matter of law. They're prohibited from joining the militia. And that does not really change until 1915, when the state authorizes its first black regiment, which is the Harlem Hellfighters, the 369th Infantry from Harlem, the old 15th New York. Even during the Civil War, the New York governor refuses to raise black troops. Several companies of the famous 54th Massachusetts, in the Mark Blue Glory the movie was made about,
Right.
were recruited in central New York because the governor wouldn't do that. The Union League Club down in New York City recruits 3 regiments of U.S. colored troops because the state refuses to do it. There are many free black New Yorkers who want to join, but the state won't have anything to do with it until 1950.
That'll be Governor Whitman.
Yeah.
A Republican.
What year is that?
1915. They get the authorization, and it's actually in 1916 when the 15th New York is started, and they become one of the first U.S. Army units overseas during World War I. There's a great quote from Colonel Haywood, the commander of the regiment. The American Army doesn't know what to do with them. The typical American reaction is, get them out of here. They sent them to South Carolina for their training, which was not a good idea. And finally,
particularly after the Brownsville thing with TR.
Yep, exactly. And it's very interesting that
Camp Jackson?
in Spartansburg was Camp Wadsworth. And they try to get him into the 27th Division, the New York Division, but that doesn't work. Then they try to get him into the Rainbow Division, and a young chief of staff named MacArthur is alleged to have said black is not a color of the rainbow. So they don't know what to do with him, so they decide to ship him overseas. The easiest thing will be get him out of the segregated South where most of the training camps are. And the ship that's taking them over is also carrying the holiday Thanksgiving turkeys to the earliest troops that are over there. The refrigeration plant fails, so they come back, and the port captain his answer is, get your stinking turkeys and niggers out of my port. So they get over to France, and nobody will do anything with them until the French say, we need combat troops. We have plenty of experience dealing with black troops. So they end up being the American unit that's longest in continuous combat. The only one never to lose a prisoner or an inch of ground. And they come back to New York, but they're still segregated. In fact, New York, this was one thing New York was ahead of. The old New York units had excuse me, black and white officers. But when they went into federal service, they could only have white officers. So, you have to excuse me.
There were no black officers at all in the American Army?
Very few, tokens.
There was one guy who was forced out because he was in line for general. There were like 3 officers or something. One guy was in line to be a general, and they said, get him out of here. Yeah.
Regimental Davis Sr. became the first general.
Yeah.
And his son was the first general of the Air Force. Very few.
And they were both in our lifetime, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, Benjamin Davis Sr. ends up commanding the 369th and New York Army National Guard for a while because they didn't know what to do with him. He was a colonel, a black colonel. And they didn't have any regular black. They didn't have any unit that was large enough for him to command as a colonel in the regular army at that time. So they sent him over to the 369th in New York. He commands it just before World War II. So, yeah, New York doesn't let blacks into the military. They're rather slow about it too. The federal military desegregates after Truman's order much faster than the National Guard. There are actually lawsuits in the state in the early 50s about it.
They're not fully. The last units to have been integrated are in '54. Federally.
Yeah, the state drags on even longer than that.
Well, what about Goldwater? I don't know the year, but one of the things Goldwater was famous for was integrating the National Guard in Arizona.
And how did he do that?
I don't know.
He was in the National Guard.
He was in Arizona.
That's right. He was a general in the National Guard,
Yeah.
wasn't he? Yeah. Yeah.
The states used to have much more of a say over running their National Guards. The federal government takes it over in steps starting in about 1903, 1933. There's another step.
So the National Guard units. I mean, how did Truman actually have the authority to order them to integrate?
Yes. By that time, the National Guard was less of a state militia, and legally was also a reserve component of the Army or the Air Force. So, as such, the decisions as to recruitment, pay, organization, and the like were all being made by the federal government. Governor still had the right to call out the National Guard in its role as the state militia, but no longer was the state directing the organization, training, equipment, uniforms, composition.
Wow.
Constitution still hasn't never been changed. It gives the governors the right to appoint the officers of the militia. But because it's now after 1933, it's technically also a peacetime reserve component of the Army and the Air Force. And the feds are paying the bill.
Who pays his boss?
Yes, he pays his boss.
Yeah.
So the governor can still appoint things like, governor has the right to take a colonel in the Air Force, Air National Guard, Army National Guard, and make him a 2-star adjutant general. That's a state right. Has a right to appoint a commander of the New York Naval Militia or the New York Guard as state officers.
So technically, the governor could appoint you a general.
Yes, technically, the governor could appoint me a general if he wanted to.
Is that how all those Kentucky colonels get appointed?
The Kentucky colonel. Yeah, they cut down on that a lot in the last few years, but yeah, there were a lot of political. Every governor quickly learns that I've got a little plum here.
Well, it used to be all political at the militia level.
Yeah. Actually, New York had a much better reputation of rising up officers who were professionally more competent. For example, the commander of the 27th Division in World War I was a officer, John F. O'Ryan. He was a
Hence the patch.
Patch, exactly.
The 27th Division patch contains a constellation on it, among other things.
Oh.
And the constellation is the constellation Orion.
And that's
For apostrophe Ryan.
that is the only patch I know of in the United States Army that is based on a play on the commander's name. That's not uncommon in the British Army. And in fact, the 27th was a New York division was an interesting case during World War I in that they were hived off from Pershing's operation and placed under command of an Australian corps in a British army. And so they actually serve in northern France and Belgium, where the rest of the American army is serving down in the Meuse-Argonne and the like. So they did pick up some
And
British practices.
the Fighting 69th was peeled off, right? Weren't they peeled off? Didn't they end up in the Rainbow Division?
They end up in the Rainbow Division. Later on, they come back to the New York Division during World War II. But yeah, all the state, and this goes to what I was saying about the states used to have much more power in declaring how they wanted to organize their guards. All the guard divisions were what are called square divisions. 4 regiments make up a division. The federal government had already changed to a triangular divisional setup. So you had a regiment that was lopped off from each National Guard division. In addition, there were special troops that were needed. So the concept of founding the Rainbow was that they would collect up all these pieces,
All the loose pieces.
that stretched like a rainbow across the country, and put them together in a new. They also had to make a decision as to who was going to be the first in France. It was very symbolic, and the idea was that if we send this Rainbow Division over there, then every part of the country would be represented, the first to put their feet on French soil. But the commander of the 26th Division from New England kind of got his hands on some transport priorities and got his division over there first. Beat like Theodore Roosevelt trying to get to Cuba with the Rough Riders, pushing the New York troops off the train and saying, "No, those are my trains. That's my transport."
Well, wouldn't the Rainbow have enjoyed the least cohesive training, being a patchwork? Would that be good to have them rushed into combat?
There was,
According to the movie.
Oh, okay.
I
Well, it
actually
must
used
be
to
true.
use that with the 4th Alabama and the 69th
Yeah.
New York.
Right.
They're smacking into each other at Camp Mills on Long Island, but in the movie it's got California mountains in the background.
Right.
Well, yes and no. A lot of the units, including even the 1st Division, which is an all-regular outfit, these had never served together as a larger command. They had served at regimental or smaller levels. They'd been stationed all over the place. The first time the regular Army units get to operate at a larger level since the Civil War is a series of maneuvers that occurred before World War I, like Plattsburgh and Manassas. And the National Guard participates in those also. And the tactics of the day were not that complicated. So the idea was that pretty much the National Guard could get over and do a good job, even though they had not trained as much as the regulars. There's good precedent for it too. One of the things the National Guard at the time had, and the regulars didn't have, is that they stayed together and they trained. Actually, they trained more. The NRA, National Rifle Association, is founded by National Guard officers, many from New York.
Why did they found it? Because of
Marksmanship. They were trying
lack
to.
of
They,
Civil
yeah,
War.
yeah. They were trying to promote the idea of aimed fire instead of mass fire, and this was a National Guard concept. So to go back to Orion is a very typical example. Orion is a West Point graduate. He's a city engineer of New York in peacetime. He's the only National Guard officer the first National Guard officer to graduate from Command and General Staff College. He's the only National Guard officer to command on the Mexican border in 1916, and then all the way through without relief in World War I. And when he comes back, he works with Senator Palmer to write key legislation in 1920 that redefines the future National Guard. So New York had a big role in developing the future of the National Guard as it developed, but wasn't so happy at first about having to integrate. That took a while.
Well, don't tell General Holland Smith about that.
Oh, Hallen Smith is an interesting story.
It's a Marine General in World War II.
Okay.
I wrote Coral and Brass, his autobiography about his experiences. And one of the things he does is he rakes the New York division to pieces for its conduct on Saipan, where its commander is relieved and a new commander has to come in. And I actually got held up, I was due to rotate out of field artillery school at Fort Sill. And my orders were held up because I had criticized Hallen Smith's Coral and Brass. Was on our reading list. And I'd asked for it to be removed from the advanced course, training course, because he lies in the book. It's out now. One of the things he says.
He lied all through the whole whole incident.
Yeah, I mean, he actually says in the book, I was so disgusted that 27th New Yorkers, one of their regimental commanders was killed. And they wouldn't even go, the cowards wouldn't even go out and get his body for 3 days until I ordered them to. And yet, the records show that the day after that colonel was shot, the very day after that colonel shot, Hallen Smith was at the funeral for the colonel.
Wow.
And I happen to know the officer who went out. He's dead now, but I happen to know the officer who went out and got that colonel's body and brought it back under Japanese fire. He didn't know he was dead. He thought he was rescuing a wounded officer, and won the Silver Star for it. But Alan Smith's book is full of those things. And nobody ever questions
He was saying things like the final Bonsai charge. There were only like 300 or 400 Japs, and there were like 5,000 bodies they found afterwards.
Well, also, Helen Smith starts the story that the regiments, the 105th, particularly from here and Schenectady and Troy and Albany, they're punched through, and if it wasn't for the 10th Marines, the artillery outfit, firing their howitzers, the whole battle would have been lost. The fact of the matter is, you look at the casualties, there were almost 800 people killed out of the 105th alone. And when they found 2 days later, we took the area back, we found many of the Marine gunners were killed in their hammocks. They never manned their guns. There were shells around.
Right. And in fact, the Japanese overran that position. It was 105th headquarters that finally stopped them. Of course, there were plenty of them had already been killed by that time. But I got the statistics in my book, and it's amazing. I mean, even in front of Company G, which was on the hill and kind of protected from the main charge, they ended up with 492 bodies in front of them, which is just amazing.
Well, they give you a level of intensity when the attack finally pushes down and breaks against regimental headquarters, where they have now gathered up the cooks and clerks and the like. One of the regimental commanders is awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously for his defense. Found because last he was seen, he was in a blaze of samurai swords. They never were able to put enough pieces of them back together.
3 medals of honor from the 105th, who were labeled cowards by General Holland Smith.
Yeah,
so what's this guy's problem?
He didn't like the Army.
Basically.
The Marine General was in charge of all the troops, including the Army troops. And I mean, there's no rhyme or reason to it. The stuff he was saying at the time was crazy. And he's feeding it all to Robert Sherrod of Time Magazine. So it all ends. These guys, for example, Company G from here lost half their men in the first 24 hours and fought for another 2 or 3 weeks after that. And they're labeled cowards in the press because of the embedded Time Magazine reporter who was only listening to the Marines. So he spreads the false story that the Marines stopped and that the 4,000 men who were overrunning the 105th and the 105th were cowards, or they just broke and ran. They did nothing of the sort. It was hand-to-hand combat at its worst.
Sounds like Paths of Glory.
It is. It's a lot like
It's very
that.
interesting. In the Army, we used to say, a Marine rifle squad consists of 8 riflemen and 4 public relations agents. And so this actually has a historical root in World War I, in that there was, of all the divisions that served overseas of the American Expeditionary Force, there was one brigade, a wonderful, excellent brigade of Marines, the 5th and 6th regiments, that did gallant service at Bella Woods and Hills. But because of the press restrictions of the day, the newspaper reports came back. It says soldiers and Marines, soldiers and Marines. Everything here, soldiers and Marines. And so the people got the idea that half of the forces served in France were Marines. It's the same thing. When I was a young Army historian, and of course my division having served in the Pacific, I was always told, by people who thought I knew history, well, yeah, the Army was in Europe, but the Pacific, that was all the Marines. I was like, no, it wasn't. My regiment fought from right after Pearl Harbor all the way through. No, it was just the Marines. And so there was this antagonism between, some of it I think was professional jealousy, some of it was definitely differences in operational outlook.
Well, that's absolutely true. The Marines were send everybody in and move as fast as possible, and the Army was more tactical.
Right. The Marines had an idea that if you hit them hard fast, you'll save less casualties in the long run. The Army's attitude was make the most of fire and maneuver. And
they both had huge casualties in Saipan, operating under different circumstances.
When you look at like Taro, and you begin to wonder.
The Marines were cannon fodder in all those battles. last night in the 27th Division in Okinawa. And holy God, what a brutal battle. Nobody, if Harry Truman heard from anybody on the front line, he would never have hesitated for a second about dropping the bomb.
It actually was, as far as I understand,
Because it was just brutal. I mean, even the couple of weeks that our division spent on the front line was brutal, and then it went on for another 6 weeks after that. The Marines fought their way down to the southern tip. I just read.
Were you up to the Shuri Castle part?
What's that?
Shuri Castle, the defense of the Shuri line.
No.
Well, that was awful. A lot of veterans compare it to World War I in the sense of I think it was actually, this is a Marine veteran, William Manchester, who also was a presidential historian.
Yes, he was.
Yeah, Manchester wrote, "You could smell the front 2 miles away.
Yeah.
The stink of death and mud."
Well, I just finished reading that book by what the heck is the guy's name now? Because I've read a couple books since then. But the part of that the Pacific series was based on his memoirs. Just a guy on the line through Palo and
with the old breed.
What's the name?
With the old breed at
Yes.
Waterloo?
Yes. What a terrific book.
That's one of the best.
It is. You want to see what it's like on the front line. He was like one of 12 guys who emerged unscathed from his company. The company over a couple of battles. The company had something like 150% casualties. They would rush guys to the line as replacement troops, and they were wounded or dead and gone before they even got their names on the roster. That's how bad it was, and it was just nonstop for like the full 6 weeks, and it's pouring rain and cold, and they're digging foxholes and sleeping over moldering Japanese soldiers who were buried right beneath them, and having to crap in the hole, and it was just. He said there was a smell that he kept talking about, because the smell of death was everywhere, and it just went on and on and on. They would take one ridge, and then the next one would be just as dug in.
Well, they were all all those caves were interconnected.
Oh.
Japanese were even using the above ground burial vaults.
Yes, that was true at Rotation Ridge and Kakazu Ridge. It'd be just cemeteries on the side of the hill, and those would be some of the defensive positions.
My understanding was that based on the amount of casualties that we were taking at Okinawa and it had taken at Iwo Jima, and knowledge that we had that the Japanese were preparing not only more kamikaze aerial and shipborne attacks, but were actually training their civilians to commit human wave attacks with sharpened sticks and armed instruments and whatever they could. That was part of the decision-making process.
Lieutenant Colonel, well, he was Major at the time, Charles de Graaf from here, one of the really great unsung heroes locally. De Graaf is put in charge of the 3rd Battalion by the time Okinawa comes along, and he's first given the job of taking one of the islands off the, I always get east and west mixed up, east coast of Okinawa, with just a couple of, well, I guess a whole battalion, and he's made a lieutenant colonel as a result of that, and then goes into the main battle a couple of days later. But it's at one point, the captain of one of his companies says to him, "We're pinned down, we can't advance." He says, "The hell you can't." He says, "The fire is is no worse in front of you than it is where you're sitting, and you might, if you're going to give up casualties, you might as well do it going forward, advance." And then they took the island in slightly more than 24 hours.
Yep.
But the thing about that story is, the Japanese defenders knew exactly what they were facing. They were all in full dress uniform, wearing all their medals, and the casualties they were taking. I mean, it's like the Battle of New Orleans. If you start comparing the casualty levels between the two sides, so there's like 2,000 Japanese dead, and we lose 10 killed and 25 wounded or something like that in the whole battle. and the whole Okinawa was like that. It were, you're talking hundreds of thousands of casualties between civilians and the Japanese military. And as bad as our casualties were, and they were horrible, they were 10-1 or something like that.
One of the odd things about the battle, I don't think we realized in terms of intelligence at the time, that was the first instance where Japanese soldiers actually first started to surrender in significant numbers.
Yeah.
Before that, it was a great rarity.
Yeah.
But I think by then, that's a clue we didn't pick up on.
But, well, of course, in that the Okinawa battle really ends shortly before Hiroshima.
Right.
They declare it secure in early June, and it really isn't.
So it's only a month before the.
I mean, we lost one of our guys from here on June 21st.
Yeah.
If not afterwards. And it's not. The battle continues till the 4th of August. And on the 6th of August, Hiroshima. But I think part of the surrender thing is that many of the troops on Okinawa were native Okinawans who were not ethnically Japanese.
That's why they're surrendering.
And that makes a huge difference because as many civilian casualties as they were, the native Okinawans were not big fans of the Japanese. They considered themselves occupied.
They had not been incorporated into Greater Japan or whatever the hell they called it for 50 years. It only happened 50 years previously.
Well,
so we're talking Formosa or Korea almost in terms of annexation.
My brother's father-in-law is Chinese, and he's got a fascinating story of his own of World War II. But he went to Okinawa in fairly recent years, and he visited all the old temples and stuff like that. He says all the inscriptions on the temples were in old Chinese script. He says these people are not Japanese at all. Japan considers it part of Japan. He says those people are not Japanese at all. They're Chinese.
They actually had their own kingdom and their own flags before the Japanese occupation.
And now, I don't know. Are you following the stuff that's going on now? Part of our return of Okinawa to Japan included these disputed islands that the Chinese and Japanese are about to go to war over.
No, I hadn't heard about that one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Japanese are now sending out their fishing boats to secure the islands, and the Chinese are sending in their warships, and it looks like the whole thing could blow up. And it all comes, I don't know, if it comes out of the Potsdam Conference or something like that. Actually, the islands technically were under our control. I read an interesting thing recently. They're talking, the continuing dispute over Formosa, Taiwan, Republic of China, whatever you want to call it. That technically, legally, the whole place still falls under United States jurisdiction. It was never really resolved. After World War II, the Chinese always claimed it as part of their own. Both Chiang Kai-shek and Mao both considered Formosa part of China, but Formosa was never turned over to China.
Had been Japan previously.
That's right. After World War II.
They're putting a big casino in either Quemoy or Matsu, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's a big controversy.
Right in artillery range.
Yeah. They got you see pictures of these huge tunnels in the rock there. It's like, yeah.
It's funny you mentioned the War of 1812. Going down New Orleans.
Yes.
Several weeks ago, I set a project for myself, and I created for you. This is the only one that exists. An album called "Of Arms and Men I Sing," which is stolen from.
Which is from Virgil's Aeneid, the opening
Right.
lines. Arma virumque cado Troiae qui primus amoris Italiam.
And in this album, you've got from the Battle of New Orleans to the Civil War. You've got from the Reuben James to the Thresher to the Bismarck. You've got from Pretty Boy Floyd to Jesse James to
Jesse James.
Belle Starr. You've got all the epic songs of Crockett and Bridger in here, which portray various aspects of American and world history. And when you get in your car, you can slip this disc in and see it. You can hear about current issues.
And you got that from me?
Taxes, the MTA, from immigration on the Mexican border with Tijuana jail. You've got it all right here in this album, sir.
Oh, God bless you. Of Arms and Man I Sing and my songs for Bob Going. Wow.
How about that,
That's
Shoppers?
terrific. Now, you don't have fired our guns and the British kept it coming.
Absolutely.
Or too many as there was
Yeah,
long ago.
Battle of New Orleans.
Sink the
yeah.
Bismarck.
Sink the Bismarck.
Oh!
Now the Reuben James. What was the Reuben James, Bob?
It was a steamship, wasn't it?
It was the first American
The
ship
paddle
sank
ship.
in World War II. It was
Oh.
sunk up near Iceland.
It was
Oh, that was
before
a different
Pearl
ship.
Harbor.
It was before
While we were
Pearl
on the
Harbor.
neutrality patrol.
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
yeah,
they
the-
were.
the second
The
Reuben
Thresher. You remember the Thresher,
I
Bob?
do remember the Thresher. That was 1962.
It was an atomic submarine that went off the coast of
They
Massachusetts.
made a song about that?
Yes, they did.
You got
And
the
have
song
it
about
right
the
there.
Pueblo.
Oh, I never heard that one, sir.
It was the captain is in the title, and it's really about the Pueblo.
Oh, I
Yeah,
didn't know
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Which reminds me of,
96 men. It says it's something about 96 men went off
Oh,
of
the
San
history.
Francisco
Bay,
Harbor.
That's about
That's
the Pueblo.
about the Pueblo.
I wonder, yeah, that's a song from the 60s. I
Yeah.
remember listening to it, and I always wondered what the 96 were. And
That's-
what it
that's
is,
the Pueblo.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
which reminds one of my favorite anecdotes of
As
my
opposed to Uncle
lifetime.
Dunk.
Well, yes. Going back, the Pueblo was captured in late '67 or early '68. The North Koreans took it in and kept the crew hostage until after the '68 election, and then they were released just around Christmas time. But it was a classic case where the crew was brought out on cameras to denounce America.
Hawaiian
Well,
good
there were two incidents. One is where the officers of the Pueblo posed for their happy pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With their
Right.
captors
Yeah.
like
Right.
this. And the other one, they allowed Commander Booker, Lloyd Booker,
Yes, that's his name.
to give his own speech, to write his own speech, but it had to be cleared with them. And they said, "What is this word peon here?" He says, "It's a Greek word meaning praise, which we've adopted into the English language,
look it up.
which is correct." And they said, "Okay, yeah, so that's fine." And he said, "And I'd especially like to pee on the North Koreans."
And wasn't there,
And that went over, and of course he got beaten mercilessly once the American press pointed out what he had said, but it got the message across. That was the point.
wasn't there one of the sailors who blinked out Morse code FU?
Yes,
As well?
yes. He
That
was
was
blinking
used
through the
Yeah.
thing, and I don't even know how they picked that up, but somebody noticed
Somebody
that.
did, yep.
Somebody noticed that he was blinking abnormally, and they run the tape or the video, whatever it was.
The Russians had offered, and they in fact were trying to insist with the North Koreans that they take over the interrogation. The North Koreans were like, no, we can do this. And the crew told them that this was the Hawaiian good luck sign.
Jeez.
That's what everybody would know it is. Come home. Of course, a Russian interrogator would have probably caught up with it. The other thing that
The Romans called it the digitus impolitus or something like that. Seriously, the impolite digit.
Yeah.
they convinced some of them to sign a statement, and they allowed them to write it, or parts of it. And these guys knew enough to use words that they would, naturally tend to gravitate towards. But it starts out like, "We were ordered by General of the Fleet Barney Gould to invade and provocate the peaceful waters of the People's Republic of North Korea." And it sounds like Communist Screed, but with a few cartoon references in it. So anybody reading it would be like, except the North Koreans, would be like, "Whoa, this is out to
This is
lunch."
great stuff.
Yeah, but the North Koreans were like, "Oh, we think you understand us,"
Well, that's because they're so isolated. If they had, if their officer corps had trained in the United States, like half the countries in the world, they would have understood all that stuff. But,
You gotta know American Cloverfield would be successful against us.
but it was amazing. I mean, they got beat for it, but
there's evidence
they
now
certainly were heroes.
that the reason why the North Koreans were told, or the way when they went after the Pueblo, was because of the material that Walker, our naval spy, was selling to the Soviets at the time. He was giving them the codes, but they needed particular equipment.
Oh,
So
wow.
the GRU, the Soviet military intelligence, worked with the Koreans to get that ship so they could get to certain pieces of equipment.
And that's what it was all about.
There's some thought that might be the reason why they did that.
And Lyndon Johnson let them get away with it.
That was,
Remember, the Pueblo was December of 1968 was a time of great hope. The new president coming in, bring us all together. Pueblo was released. I think they probably Nixon probably scared the hell out of them because they didn't know what to expect. And besides which, they remembered Eisenhower telling them as soon as he took off, you got about 15 minutes to agree to a ceasefire, or else we're dropping the bomb. So they probably were expecting pretty much the same thing. So they released the Pueblo, and then Apollo 8 circles the moon just before Christmas. All that took place within a couple of days, as I recall. Yeah. What time we got here?
12 o'clock on the nose.
Oh, we got a few minutes. We got about 10, 15 minutes. Okay. Well, David, what advice would you give the Romney campaign at this point, having written 1948?
Get out on the stump. And about the time of Lloyd Booker and the song whose name I can't remember, there was a book which I can remember called Body Language, Julian Fast. And the basic message was your body language should match your message. So I'm so glad your father died, Bob. That's the wrong message. Your body it's like disconnect. Mitt Romney is trying to convince the American public what they already know of, that there is a crisis. And that they should do something about it, okay? And his body language is that there is no crisis. Is he so calm and bland as he explains what he's going to do and how capable, etc. he's going to be. This is a crisis. This is the United States of America. This is not acquiring staples. And have the body language, which it might be a little tough to reinvent, to do it. I sat in Washington when I was there last week with someone who had written a column, not really disagreeing with the message that Romney had conveyed about Libya, but the way he had conveyed it. That a Reagan would have had a steely eye about it, would have had the little tone in his voice. And Romney, as correct as his opinion was not delivered as effectively.
Style is the message.
Yes. And the medium is the message. And so he's got to get a little, show some emotion, okay? That's a big part of it. I don't know what's going on in those swing states, what sort of ads they are running, but he is the product. It is not just the commercial. He's got to also sell himself, which is why the entire Obama campaign is not about Obama. It's about Romney at this point. If Romney, the old adage, if the campaign is about you, you lose. Okay? If it's about Obama, Obama loses. If it's about Romney, Romney loses. So he's got to somehow change his presentation, and he's got to get out on the stump more. At quote of the day in Politico, donor in Texas to Romney, one-liner of the day. I'm glad to give you money, but why aren't you in Ohio?
That's what I was about to say.
We get back to Ohio all the time.
My advice to Romney is the same as Nixon's. Run Ohio like you're running for governor. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, you pick up a bit of Western Pennsylvania. At the same time.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And even Michigan.
Yeah. And Michigan.
Yeah. You show up in Toronto, you're going to show up in Toledo, and you're going to show up in Michigan.
The thing that is really kind of amazing about this campaign is that nothing seems to move the dial much.
Either way for either candidate.
You keep reading all the experts saying, "Oh, this is a bad week for this one, or a bad week for that one," and blah, 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 blah. And nothing is changing except a little bit here and there. If you believe the polls.
If you believe the poll, if all of those are correct, we're also coming off a period in the convention period and such, where Obama was outspending Romney 7-1. Romney is saving his money, evidently, and his energy, evidently, for that last month, the last week or two, the last fortnight, as William Buckley Jr. would say. And remember the lesson of how Cuomo, the elder, was elected. Cuomo the Elder was elected very narrowly against Lou Learman because Lou Learman forgot to buy ads in the last week.
Wow.
They did not place, they got off the air in the last week, and Cuomo wins by just a little bit. So save your first in, last out. And Romney does seem to be doing that. But it's like, it's like don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes, and you're like, and you're so nervous, and you want them to, and of course we're not going to see it anyway.
Here's what
large part.
Here's one of the things I really don't like, and it happens over and over and over, is these guys running the campaign think the campaign's about them, and you've seen nothing in the last couple of weeks except anonymous sources in the Romney campaign commenting about the campaign. Right. And they're not doing their candidate any favors. Shut up. We can talk about it after the election's over if you want, about how brilliant you are. Meanwhile, shut up. It's not about you.
I was in an office in Washington. Very conservative people. Not squishy, soft group. I mean, really conservative. And they were absolutely having kittens about the Libya statement. They were in a total
Of course, you were down there just
panic.
about the time it had come out.
It was
right?
just when it had come out. It just popped, and there was panic in the streets. And finally, I said to him, look, there's an American ambassador dead in the streets of Libya. And all we are talking about is what Romney said? Nobody cares about what Romney said out there. They care about there's a dead American out there, ambassador, and we're the ones talking about Romney, okay? We're not normal, okay? We're in Washington. This is what we talk about in Washington.
Right. That was an inside the Beltway thing. If
it was, and there was no drop off in his support for that.
And on the street, nobody was talking about Romney's statement other than, that was okay.
Yeah, there was
I didn't hear anybody
nothing wrong with it.
You know, other than Jerry Scrocky and people who just press the buttons. And
whatever, but no, that was not damaging at all. I think what he's kind of waiting for, he's drawn back, which is may be good and may not be good. You want him to push this stuff, but this story is really developing now on what happened in Libya. It is not so bad to wait until it is all in.
Now the rest of the story.
It's really coming out, and
the rest of the story is
it
awful.
Stinks.
You can see why they don't want to talk about it anymore.
That is why the tape of the 47 appeared at that point in time. It was to change the subject from Libya because this is only going to get worse.
Boy, it turns out, I'm reading today that the ambassador himself had been warned and told Washington there were problems.
Yeah, no bodyguards to the ambassador in Libya.
But meanwhile, Valerie Jarrett gets 5 bodyguards for her vacation on Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah, doesn't. I would hesitate to defend that in a debate.
Yeah. Well, debates are coming up. I think Romney has shown himself capable of handling himself in debates.
In a way, he's like the tortoise and the hare. You're not quite sure how he does it, but at the end of the day, he's there. Yeah.
But will he be there on that particular day at the end?
I mean, every week during the primaries, somebody was doing better than Romney.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Somebody's doing better than Romney. It ended up not being the same person over and over, and eventually he started turning it around himself because he was the last guy standing. And he has been the tortoise in this race from the very beginning. But what really is shocking me now is the fact that he isn't out there campaigning.
No, this is public.
Which is contrary to what he's been doing all year. Mm-hmm. There are several reasons for that. Maybe he's just tired, but there's time to sleep on November 7th.
You sleep after the World Series.
Yeah. And maybe he's got everything planned, but if it were me running for president, I'd just be in I don't know what state I just woke up in mode right now. Mm-hmm. Because you got nothing to lose by just going out there and giving your stump speech. You don't have to give a press conference every day, and then you just go out there and be there. They've been drawing great crowds when they've been going out.
Yeah,
but Tom Dewey drew great crowds, right?
He drew a big crowd, oddly enough, in San Francisco just before the election. Richard Nixon drew a great crowd, and his biggest crowd was in Atlanta.
Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah, he got no votes in Georgia. He drew a big crowd. I don't know. So, sometimes they can be fluky, but it is indicative of support. Sure.
No, the news reports are that he's saving himself for the debates.
Well, that could be.
You know,
You need 2 months to rest.
But again, we're kind of inside the Beltway, even though we're way outside it, because this is all we talk about. But really, to an extent, the public isn't really fully paying attention to any of this stuff yet. Even now, even in the post-Labor Day, post-convention phase. So maybe the people who are going to make the difference really don't pay attention till the first debate.
Well, we're not seeing the ads. We're just
We're not. We're in a
we
bad
don't know
situation.
what's going on.
Right.
We know that Chris Gibson either did that or did this, and we know that Doheny
And not even too much about that.
and Owens, and that's all we know right now.
Well, you know all things New York, according
I do.
to Human Events.
That's true. According to that.
How are the legislative races? We had some fascinating primaries last week. Not
Yeah.
too many people voted in them.
No.
Did Quackenbush have an independence party?
I finally found a coherent listing of results last night for the Assembly and Senate races, and it was on C-SPAN. It was on C-SPAN. And it's like, whoa, and they reported no votes, so maybe no one voted. I don't know. But there was nothing reported for that race. I was specifically looking at that. I think one seat which can change hands fairly locally is the old Bob Riley seat. I think that Jennifer Whalen stands a good
That's
chance.
like Colony and
Colony and Niskayuna, and used to be Clifton Park, but then they decided to make it more democratic because it was too close for comfort last time. And Riley wasn't going to run again. She won her independence primary like with 56% of the vote against maybe 2 other candidates, Democrats. That was pretty good, and she's been around the block before. It looks to me like Roy McDonald will not receive the Republican endorsement or line, and I think he will be pressured to leave the stage before the
I was reading this
November.
morning that I don't know, something like a third of the absentee ballots have been counted, and she's still
She
maintaining
picked up
110 votes. or something.
she picked up 4 votes. He had picked up 16 in a recount. Steve Saland has picked up votes in the absentees in the Hudson Valley, but he's been crushed in what was, I believe, just an opportunity to ballot in the conservative.
Oh wow!
So DiCarlo's race was such Neil DiCarlo, who ran against Steve Saland. That race was the shocker. That's the outlier. That is the bizarro
Nobody
race.
was expecting that.
No one expected that. He's he had run against Nan Hayworth for Congress for the nomination 2 years ago. Refused to endorse her.
DiCarlo,
Afterwards, yes, DiCarlo did not. He does not live in the district. Because of redistricting, he can run this year. He says, I'll move into the district.
How far out is it?
It's in Brewster, which is probably not
Close.
that far.
That's where that girl came from, right?
Brewster?
Yeah.
That
Did you take
girl?
the train from Brewster to
I
New
do it,
York
son.
every
Marlo
day?
Thomas, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Marlo Thomas?
So
Not in real life,
So he
just
takes
a
the
fictional
train
girl.
north in his district,
Yeah.
and I don't think he will prevail in the Republican, but he will run on the conservative line. Certainly, if he wouldn't, he's a serious guy in his own way, and the Republicans have been worrying that if DiCarlo is the nominee, they will lose the seat. I think it is a very real possibility that they will lose the seat anyway. Whether, particularly with DiCarlo on that line, they hold McDonald's seat probably. Maybe they pick up 2 seats downstate in Westchester County and in Queens, but there's always been the chance, gay marriage or not, that they lose the fluke seat out in Erie County, Grisanti. It may be a rerun of the previous election, where they were supposed to win the Senate, and they were supposed to win it with seats here and here, and then they pick it up seats there and there, where they pick up the seat in Long Island that they weren't supposed to win.
Yeah.
They lose the seat in Rockland where they were.
Yeah.
They pick up the seat in Buffalo, which is a fluke. And this time, they end up losing Buffalo and the Hudson Valley, which they never should have, except for this stunt, this vile, awful stunt that they pulled. But they win it with picking up the seats in Westchester and Queens, but they could have had a comfortable majority. And then another wild card is the Starobin seat, which they picked up in Brighton Beach, basically replacing Carl Kruger. That's been redistricted out, basically, but their guy is still running. He's running against a really, really orthodox, big O, orthodox, small c, conservative Democratic candidate who, when Paul Ryan was announced, said, that's a great choice. He's going to be a wonderful asset to a Romney administration, literally. And also opposed to gay marriage. And so, if need be, he might vote to organize with the Republicans.
So it could be one of those weird situations.
It could be
like
one of
a
those
couple years
weird
ago.
situations. There's also the wild card of the 4 independent Democrat caucus, where 4 guys, or three guys, and Diane Savino have their own sort of split off caucus from the Senate Democrats. Now, what will they do if they're the balance of power? I suspect that Senator Klein from the Bronx and Westchester then becomes the majority leader or the temporary president of the Senate, with the Republicans getting, whatever they get. But that he will be, it will be like the 4 amigos again, only in a different bunch of amigos.
Wow.
Was that confusing enough?
No, I got you. I'm following you. And of course, then you got the added wild card of the
Amador seat.
Of the additional seat.
Well, the Amador seat could also prove to be the difference.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So they're going to an odd number from an even number.
That's right. Yeah.
So-
Well, that takes the lieutenant governor out of play, doesn't he?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Well, somebody abstains a lot.
Yeah, I don't think there are any other seats in play. They're touting the fact that Grisanti got 60% in his primary. He was one of the 4 pro-gay marriage senators out in Erie County. But if you take a look, 60%, even that for an incumbent
That means he
Republican
lost
senator
40%.
is not wonderful. I mean, it's wonderful compared to McDonald and Saland, but it's not particularly wonderful to Jim Seward's 82%.
Right.
No.
All right. Especially when you're running for re-election and it could be a tight race.
When you got a problem
Yeah.
to begin with.
Wow. So things will be crazy in New York again, and
Yeah,
nobody.
they always are.
Still.
And then of course, what will Cuomo do? Because Cuomo has said, I would endorse McDonald if he runs. I would endorse Saland, so he's jumping in. Will he jump in to support like the coalition of the 4 dissident Democrats and the Republicans?
Yeah.
Maybe.
And that would make for a weird thing because he would be supporting the Republican over his own Democrat,
Right.
who has a better chance of winning.
And we haven't discussed the pretty in pink candidate, Mindy Meyer, running against Kevin Parker in Brooklyn,
Well, I know.
who enjoys the 3-page fashion spread in the New York Post. You're not following this race?
I haven't been getting the Post.
Oh well,
much
this is
recently.
the
Last time I got the Post, it
Yes.
was a quarter.
Yeah.
Down to buck and a quarter.
Kevin Parker, of course, maybe that had to do with the fact that he assaulted a New York Post photographer once.
Ah,
Remember him?
no. And so,
But she's 22 years old and has this really fascinating website and approach to things. She was going to run conservative, independent, and conservative, Republican, and independent. And she somehow forgot to file papers for Republican and Independent or something. Yeah. And but so she's still on conservative, and for a candidate who will get probably 7 to 8% of the vote in that district has enjoyed remarkable publicity. I see her as a Fox News commentator in the near future.
She got blonde hair, right?
No, not Mindy Meyer. No.
Oh, right.
she Foxa?
Is she what?
A fox.
In a Mindy Meyer sort of way, yeah.
Okay. Wow. No, I guess I've been missing that. So I don't know what Lindsay Lohan's up to this week.
She was arrested.
She got arrested.
She banged the guy's leg, maybe.
But
Maybe not.
no.
Hey, she should be allowed to drive.
She didn't
hit
bang
too
the
many
guy's
people
leg.
on the sidewalk.
She didn't bang the guy's leg. She ran into him.
She ran into him.
Yeah, no evidence of alcohol, I guess.
Wait a minute.
But
she's,
then left.
Wait,
She
time
just
out.
left.
She's got a license? She's got a license?
Someplace probably.
She's on her own.
How can that be? How can she have a driver's license with her record?
If she gets convicted, she goes to jail.
Again.
No.
Or they go for the first time again.
Yeah, they rescind her parole.
It is Ride Captain Ride. It's in this
Right.
Ride
Captain,
Ride.
ride upon your mystery
Mystery
ship.
I haven't heard
That's
that in
it.
years.
Yeah.
Great song.
Yeah.
I don't remember it at all.
But I didn't include it there, but I'll find it for you.
You'd hear it, you'd recognize it.
Yeah.
Sink to Bismarck, though, with the Mitch Miller boys?
No, it's not Mitch. It's Kingston
Johnny
Field.
Rivers?
I think Kingston Field did that on there. No, Johnny Horton.
Johnny
Johnny
Horton,
did Sink to
right.
Bismarck.
And he did Battle of New Orleans
Yes,
too,
he did.
right?
He also
North
did
to Alaska?
North to Alaska. That's all on one CD
It's a
too.
very
Yeah, Jim Bridger, he did. That's on there. Davy Crockett. You'll enjoy it.
Is it the full ballad of Davy Crockett all the way to the Alamo?
There's 1, 2, 3, 4 verses. No,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
don't
Do you
Alamo.
have the theme from Guns of Navarone?
Not on there. No,
Oh,
sir.
okay.
What a great movie. I saw that again recently. That is just a great movie. It's all hogwash, right? There was
I don't think it was based on anything.
Based on anything.
No.
But boy, what a great
In fact, there was a
movie.
war going on. That was about it.
Yeah, there was a World War II, right?
You know
Yeah.
who else appears in that movie? The USS Slater.
Is that
No.
right?
That's one of those ships going through and
That's
what
right.
looks like stock footage.
Back when it was a Greek ship,
There
right?
was a Greek training vessel at the time called the Eagle.
Huh.
Huh.
And that's one of her 2 film credits. The other is Alicki joins the Navy.
Who?
Alicki, a Greek comedy.
Oh, okay.
Basically, this young girl running around the ship going, "Whoa, what am I doing here?"
There you go.
You know, when I was in Boston, we were really running over time, but I was in Boston not long ago, and we went out to the military port because we got to park our car for free there because my daughter's boyfriend is in the Marine Reserve, so we got to park and kind of get the tour of one of the ships. There was an Army ship in port. That struck me as funny, but I guess it's not all that uncommon that there are in fact ships that belong to the Army.
They got planes, don't they?
Only a few fixed wing.
Okay.
Basically, we cut an agreement with the Air Force years ago that we don't do fixed wing. We just do rotary. They let us arm rotary, and we agreed to stay out of fixed wing as much as possible. So we only have a few small Sky King kind of planes. But we do have a large fleet. We have Army transports, lighters to go from Navy transports to shore and up across the shore, and used to have the Army mine planter service. So you could actually be, you'd find these naval uniforms with little Army insignia on them.
Is that right?
Yeah,
So
the mine planter
naval type
service.
uniforms.
Yep. Yep.
Wow. See?
There you go. What could you learn today? No place else.
If you're going to call this an informative show, I don't know what you call it. Noted presidential historian David Pietrusza, noted city and Army historian Robert von Hasseln, Jim Nikosha, who wasn't supposed to be here, but now won't be here on another day to make up for it, and of course Gavin Murdoch, and myself, Bob Going, and we'll be back, some of us, next week with more of the show with no name.